is Organaski of WeAreChange.org here in beautiful New Hampshire at PorcFest. In this video, we are going to be talking about a lot of important issues, especially the latest law changes in New York City, the war on drugs, the failed war on drugs, which is what it should really be called, online regulation, and of course, most importantly, online freedom. And to talk about that, plus a lot more, we have Lynn Ulbricht, who of course is the mother and advocate of Ross Ulbricht. And the story of Ross, I don't know if you've never heard it, it's absolutely insane what's happening to your son. The sentence he was given for being charged with running the Silk Road. But I want to get into what's happening with Ross, what's happening with the fight, and most importantly, what is this Silk Road 2.0 that also is coming up in the news right now?
Well, my take on the Silk Road 2.0 is that the government said it was identical, only bigger. They sold more drugs in a month and had more listings, and yet the person who was running it, Blake Benthall, recently got 2 years back taxes as his punishment when Ross, who's they're saying is equivalent, got double life plus 40 years without parole. Now, if Ross is so dangerous that he needs to be kept in a cage for the rest of his life because he's so dangerous, how come Blake Benthall is out with 2 years back taxes? Yeah. And then the other guy who was working with him, and his name escapes me at the moment, was given 5 years.
Wow. Yeah. That's a big difference. I mean, I still remember Ross's story and just how sensational the media was running with it. They were running with charges that he was never charged with. They were running with just blatant, mistruths, big headlines, smearing him, slandering him. This case is very important because when you look at the actual facts here, there's a totally different story than what you're being told here. And this is why we're doing this interview. This is why we do an interview every single year, because this is an important case, because this sets a very important precedent that will affect a lot of other people, especially when it comes to online freedoms and online regulations. Because if you look at what Ross was kind of accused of doing, what he was accused of facilitating, Mark Zuckerberg could go down for the same charges, essentially because he has a platform where people communicate, and a lot of drug dealers use Facebook. But this whole kind of war on drugs is also failing flat on its face. But talk about the larger kind of internet regulations, internet online protocols that were severely affected here with Ross, because we have a lot of people asking the government for regulations right now, but the ramifications of that are far more severe than just thinking the government's going to do the right thing.
Well, essentially what they did with Ross was that, and his case, was saying that a website host is responsible for anything that is done or said or sold or bought on a site. Now this is a big slippery slope. This can be hate speech somewhere on the site, or anything that's sold. And Amazon was sued by a mother whose daughter bought cyanide on Amazon and killed herself with it, tragically. Is Jeff Bezos being hauled in? Is Craig Newmark of Craigslist with all, and you mentioned Facebook, there's terrorist activity, there's all kinds of things, there's murders on Facebook Live. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it is setting a precedent for this kind of chill that could go onto the internet. And it's also called vicarious liability. It's saying that you are responsible for what other people do. And this is a very troubling precedent because it widens the criminal umbrella to include maybe a conspiracy when I'm not even hardly aware of something or not aware of it.
Yeah, you don't have to be doing it, but someone could be doing something on your platform and they point the finger on you. And of course, it's selectively enforced like we saw with Ross, but with the big tech giants, it's like, we're just going to slowly look away.
Too big to fail?
Yeah, too big to fail, too big to jail. When you look at essentially a huge monopoly of communications, and these kind of big tech companies are treating themselves like they are publishers, curating content, deciding what can and cannot be up there based on their own standards, not up to the law, but just based off their own interpretations. That's why independent media that has been, talking to you and talking about these important issues has been getting squashed. But that's not the important aspect here.
One thing is that independent media has been so much more truthful and incisive and probe more deeply into the important issues of this case than the mainstream media, which is, echoes each other, it's fairly shallow, and actually comes up with things that are completely false.
Exactly. When you look at Ross's case and you look at the headlines that were coming up before that, it's mind-blowing to see the truth, to understand the truth, to look into this, and to see what the media was running with, because it was just blatant lies a lot of the times. Clickbait insanity, rage bait a lot of the times, based off to manipulate people's emotions and to skew to give their power up to another authority. But another thing that I wanted to talk to you, because you were just sitting down, you were telling me a lot of interesting facts about the Silk Road and about drug legalization, because New York City just announced that, and New York just announced that marijuana is decriminalized, and a lot of charges are being expunged from a lot of individuals who were caught with minor amounts of marijuana. This is huge news. Finally, governments are recognizing that the war on drugs is an utter failure, but there's important lessons here from the Silk Road as well that highlighted that as well.
Yeah, well, first of all, yes, there were drugs on Silk Road. That can be argued, but that was consenting adults. That was the intention, and it was almost all user amounts of cannabis. Now, cannabis is becoming legal in many states, and yet federally it's not, and people are still in prison. There's still, I think, around 50 people serving life for cannabis in our system, and of course Ross. And the drug war is an obvious failure. It's been going on for 45 years, over $1 trillion with a T dollars of taxpayer money, and people are still using drugs. Yeah. It's a complete failure, but yet it's successful in feeding mass incarceration and growing this monster that is metastasized 800% and the prison population, and destroying so many lives and children's lives and families, and it's so unnecessary. It's not really making us safer at all.
I would argue the war on drugs has actually ruined more lives than drugs itself. Especially with just the severe penalties that people in different states still in the United States face for marijuana. I personally don't use marijuana. I don't like marijuana. It has negative effects on me, but I will always want people to have that responsibility within themselves instead of being have guns put to their heads and thrown in jail, kidnapped for essentially just trying to use something for their body. Sometimes it helps a lot of people medically with so many different things, and it's so backwards. You would think, geez Louise, like this is backwards and it's hurting more people. And I believe the important case of the Silk Road highlights that so much, because there is an argument to make, and I saw a lot of people make this argument, that the Silk Road actually helped people buy and created more safety elements with not only a review-backed system, but people knowing, their dealer knowing what they're getting, people being able to test certain substances. When it's on the black market, it's a wild west. People are, buying substances, you don't know who they're buying it from in seedy alleyways and corners, but online they were able to actually see a trusted source who was not a trustworthy source, who was adding certain chemicals, who was hurting people with added substances that didn't need to be there. That was an important element that a lot of people need to also understand here, because there was a lot of harm reduction that was done here that is very, very important around this particular case. Now, how is Ross doing himself? He's sending out some tweets, which I pay attention to. I retweet Ross all the time. I think it's awesome that someone could have a Twitter account from jail, but how is Ross doing right now?
He's doing a lot better. He was in previously a very violent place with violent gangs and some very dangerous people, and there were people murdered, beaten, stabbed there fairly often. Ross is totally peaceful, totally nonviolent. So the fact that he's been moved to a place that is fairly safe is a huge relief, and he does not belong. The only reason Ross is in a maximum security prison is because of the barbaric, draconian life sentence that was given to him. Otherwise, he'd be in a camp based on his security score. I mean, he could be here with everybody having a great time, and he's totally, chill guy. But he's now in a place where at least there's not a lot of violence, which was tough. It's like being in a war zone, and it's almost like post-traumatic stress to kind of come down from that. Yeah. He had to constantly be on the alert, and he was totally unprepared for something like that. But he managed, and now he's in a safer place, and it's a big relief.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge help there, and obviously there's a lot of things to talk about, the larger kind of injustices that happen with the prison industrial complex, which is a whole other industry to even get into, and just the mistreatment that happens there. But how's the fight going? How can people help out? What's the latest information we're trying to get Ross out? Because again, Ross is doing more jail time than murderers, than rapists, than terrorists, essentially as well. And then for creating a website that people could, allegedly creating a website that people argue creates harm reduction. Come on, that makes no sense. Where's the fight? How can we help?
Thank you. No, well, I really need to convince President Trump that this is a worthy case for him to commute Ross's sentence. He's not a threat to anyone. He can contribute a tremendous amount, and he didn't get a fair trial, and the sentence is out over the top. Double life plus 40 years for a nonviolent first-time offender is scary to me. It's like there shouldn't be anyone with a sentence like that in this country. It's draconian, and it's government abuse at its worst, and it needs to be corrected. And I want to convince the president of that, because he has the power to say, no, this we need to commute this sentence. We need to correct it. This isn't right, and it's not. And we have now a petition. It has over 175,000 signers, and please sign it. Please help us get to 250,000, 500,000. I want to be able to take it to President Trump and say, please pay attention to this. And you can go to freeross.org/petition, or just the website, freeross.org, and there's a banner, and sign it and share it, please. If you don't think this is the correct sentence, that's really what you'd be signing.
And people need to understand here, your voice matters here. Trump has been pardoning a lot of nonviolent drug offenders. He's working with Kim Kardashian, of all people. This is not really highlighted in the news that much, even though Kim Kardashian's in it. That's just a surprise. She's always in the news.
Trying. She's using her celebrity for good, and I admire her for that. I think it's great. And he's also working with other people. I think he really cares. This is something that he wants to do, and so I'd like Ross to be on that list. He can do a lot of good outside the prison. He's very smart. He's a good person. He meant well, his intentions were good, and he has a lot to contribute. I mean, this was the first use case of Bitcoin. Without Ross, Bitcoin would be probably an unknown, obscure geek thing. I mean, seriously. And he has vision, and he wants to use it for good. He cares about people. He doesn't care about, all the things he was. That's not Ross at all.
This is such an important case, and I believe if we raised our voices loud enough, that could actually something actually could be done here. Trump and Kim Kardashian already pardoning individuals who were victims of this injustice, of this stupid ass war on drugs, and it's good on for Kim Kardashian. I'm not a big fan of hers, but as you said, I am now for the work that she's doing that really is making a difference. Lynn, thank you so much for everything. Thank you so much for your time. Check out Lynn's website. Check out the information about Ross in the description below. Sign the petition. Definitely recommend, if there's a cause to get a beat behind, it's definitely the cause of Ross. Thank you again so much for watching. Stay tuned for more here on WeAreChange.org.